Welcome back to Lambeau Leapers Live. I'm your host, Splash. As always, we're joined with Alex. How's it going, man?
It's going good. We've got a lot to talk about after taking off last week. So,
Yes, sir.
we've got obviously minicamp is here, and so there's some things to talk about. Obviously, the quarterback drama is what we're all discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Quarterback one, that's Aaron Rodgers. Nothing's going to change. Alex and I are both pretty clear that Aaron Rodgers will be starting week one. But Aaron Rodgers isn't at mandatory minicamp. So,
Right.
what do you
So
make of that?
$93,000 is the fine. The question is whether they're going to excuse the fine potentially, or even if he's fined it, they could always pay it back in whatever deal they eventually come to, like an extension of some kind.
Right.
So they could always get that money back to him, or label him as an excused absence, and then the fine would not go through. Obviously, it's an optional fine, so Green Bay definitely doesn't have to make that move. So I wouldn't be surprised. It would make a lot of sense if they did not fine him, obviously, just to try to soften any potential, they don't want to damage the relationship any further.
Right.
But we've learned a couple different things over the course of the last week or so that, when you talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation, everybody talks about, it's always been from the beginning. As soon as Adam Schefter put out his, what he was hearing or whatever as a report, he continues to call it a report, but but what we know for sure that he was upset, and we found that out. But everything suddenly went to Rodgers is requesting a trade. But everything we've heard and everything that we've heard to be indicated is that Rodgers hasn't requested a trade. He doesn't want to demand a trade. He hasn't demanded a trade. He just said he isn't coming back, which of course we feel like is like a ploy to get some of those things he wants. He wants to see the change, and he wants to come back, but he wants those philosophical changes that the things like that. Ian Rappaport said, he hasn't heard Rodgers has requested a trade. He hasn't heard Rodgers say he's never coming back. He hasn't heard some of these things that everybody's taking and running with, that people like Adam Schefter have put out there or assumed. We haven't heard Aaron say anything except that he loves his teammates, his coaches, the fans, the organization itself, the history of the organization. He obviously has some issues with the front office and the way that they've operated on some level. James Jones kind of gave us some insight today, where he kind of talked about what Rodgers what he's truly, upset about. And when you look at what James Jones said, he basically, he said Rodgers is more upset with the guys that they've let out of the building, and rather than like them not getting other guys, or making certain moves like taking Jordan Love, or does he want the GM fired? James Jones said no, that's not the case. He has told me he doesn't want the GM fired. He's not trying to get the GM fired. He's told me it's not about the quarterback. Jordan Love said today that he had a conversation with Rodgers a week ago. There's a good relationship there. It's about the way that the front office is operated, really, not letting him know that he's, that they're letting guys like Corey Linsley, or letting guys like Jordy Nelson, Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson, if you want to go way back, a bunch of guys that Rodgers is super close with, or guys that are strong contributors to this team. They've let them walk, and, not in every case have those players gone on to do great things, but he feels like that they could do some of the things they were still doing in Green Bay. And especially, maybe he would, if he heard from the front office, or if they had that kind of conversation, he would be okay with it. But instead he gets blindsided. His favorite teammate is cut from the roster, Jordy Nelson, or, things of that nature. Like, he doesn't want to be blindsided by things, or hear it from his agent, or hear it from somebody else. He wants the GM to come to him. He doesn't, and a lot of the thing is also, I feel like, he doesn't want the GM to wish him a happy birthday with this series of Snapchat stories. He wants the GM to give him a personal phone call and wish him a happy birthday. And what I mean by that is, a couple things. Number one, like I mentioned, he wants to learn of information from Brian and discuss it, and, give his thoughts first, before those kind of moves are made. And he's also, it's the same thing with the Jordan Love thing. Like, it's all of the above. Like, it's just you throw all that into the mix, and he doesn't want to hear these things. And especially when you're talking about, even when Brian is coming out and saying, Rodgers' value is immeasurable. We love Aaron. We want him back for years to come. he wants that to be, not just said publicly. He wants that to be put into place. He wants that to come through a contract of some kind. So all of those different things kind of mold into the situation that we're in. But James Jones kind of says, he says he'll be there for training camp, which is obviously important. He's talked to Aaron, like these are things that, James isn't going to just say these things when he's had conversations with Rodgers. Here it is. He says, I truly believe that he will be there for training camp. This will get fixed and the relationship will get much better between him and the GM. Obviously that's important, to hear a guy who talks to him maybe more than anybody who's in the, in terms of like the media sphere. I think like having James Jones come out and say things like that is certainly telling of the situation. And that's, we all think, for the most part, except a lot of people in the media don't think it's fixable, but that's because they're hearing things from guys like Adam Schefter who are, really kind of dug in on their thought process with how this has gone down. But the reality is this isn't like any normal report that a guy like Schefter gets or a news story. This is something that, nobody's really speaking about specifically from the inside. Mark Murphy said it the other day when he did his column, his monthly column, the less we say in public on both sides, the better. And I don't think they've said much. Obviously Rodgers has not said much personally. I don't think his people inside his camp have really shared much as well, at least any truthful information. And then obviously Green Bay keeps everything in-house, locked tight. So, I really don't think Schefter and other guys know as much about this situation as they think. And I think a lot of what they know is really not correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one thing that it's a unique circumstance with Green Bay as opposed to other teams with other quarterbacks, because off the top of my head, Rodgers is one of the longest tenured players in the NFL, let alone quarterbacks. Right. I can't think of many guys that were drafted in 2005 and are still active, let alone for the same team. But regardless, it's one of the unique circumstances that you have perhaps the most valuable asset in NFL history, even though he is 37, 38. You're in a unique circumstance with Green Bay, the market, and the talent you have at quarterback. So Green Bay is not going to just let that walk, right? So you want to work to repair the relationship. You want to fill in the gaps. You want to fill in like you said, instead of a Snapchat story to say happy birthday, like a phone call or meeting him in person, going out to dinner. Instead of hearing through the grapevine that Jake Kumaro or Jordy Nelson or any number of players is leaving, you want to have that conversation with, you want Aaron and Brian to have that conversation and Brian say, hey, I understand you love you some Kumaro or Nelson or Lindsley, but it's a business decision. We have guys in house, like explain the reasoning or at least have a personal, like, this is why we're letting Jordy go, right?
Yes.
This is why Corey is a Charger, not a Packer, and I think that sort of intimacy, that sort of like human to human connection, we can lose sometimes. And I think that's an important thing for Rodgers, Brian, and the Packers front office to achieve again and get back to, hey, Aaron, how's it going? But in person, or on the phone,
right.
Not through the media. So I think that's something the Packers can do to, kind of get back to square one and get it back to being not about the off-field stuff, getting it back to being about the on-field stuff. And I think that's absolutely what they should aim for moving forward.
Yeah, I think you made a great point. You kind of echoed a lot of what Rodgers said to Kenny Mayne on ESPN just a couple weeks ago, where he kind of talked about, obviously the emphasis was about the people, and he really means, I think when you look back at it and hearing what James Jones said, kind of gives me a little bit of a new perspective. Everybody assumed when he was talking about the people, oh, I'm the people, Rodgers is, give me what I want. People, you're not. But I think Rodgers really wants the Packers to remember, the people as in the guys that are in that building, like the players around him. And I said this when I made a post a couple weeks ago, Rodgers is fighting for something bigger than himself really here. And that's true. I really do think that rings true now, especially after we heard James Jones say, look, like, this is Rodgers' thoughts, and he really wants it for the players that are leaving, that he feels like should still be there. He feels like the Packers are doing a lot of the players that have made this team great for so many years. He feels like they're doing them wrong in many instances. So that to me, that's, I think, the big issue. And how do you solve that? It's hard to say. It has to be some. I mean, there's nothing they can do to prove that at this point now. I mean, they can't bring Jordy Nelson back. Like they can't
Right.
they can't make those moves now. But I think they maybe by recommitting to him with some kind of contract that emphasizes his security with the team. Maybe that shows that they're ready to not make that same mistake that they've made with guys that Rodgers has really liked and has been a Packer for so long and done great for the organization. If they keep Rodgers locked in, maybe that's a sign to him that they'll be willing to do it for other guys for less money, obviously, and things like that than he'll make. So maybe that's enough if we get to some kind of agreement with an extension that could maybe solve that whole thing.
And I think it's important to have the conversation, even if Corey Linsley was impossible to bring back, at least say, hey, Aaron, I know you love Linsley. You have this probably a great bond center to quarterback, but financially we can't make it work. And here are the options we have moving forward. And then you roll down all the interior linemen you guys drafted last year. And then you look at the guys who drafted this year, Josh Myers, for instance. Of course, when you're having the conversation about Linsley, you don't know if you're going to get Josh Myers. But regardless, you have options in the draft. Like, hey, in the draft, there's this guy you like. Or, hey, even Aaron, you watch a little bit of film. Tell us what centers you like. Or talk to the scouting department and, pitch your idea for, do you like Josh Myers? Do you like Creed Humphrey? Do you like Dickerson? That sort of deal. And I think some sort of like feedback loop is important if you're running an NFL team to some degree, of course.
Right.
If Aaron Rodgers is going to choose Jake Kumaro over Julio Jones, you might have an issue there. But, Aaron Rodgers is an all-world quarterback. He probably knows what he's talking about when it comes to wide receiver talent too. So, I would imagine Green Bay values Aaron's opinion, but I think they should value it maybe a little bit more. And at the very least, have the conversation, hey, Aaron, this is why we're getting rid of Corey. We're $10 million over the cap, and we're going to have to pay him $50 million, and he only has one all-pro season, yada, yada, yada. Whatever the reasoning may be, I think transparency is paramount in a relationship like this. Now, if, say, Rodgers, I don't know, hypothetical, we're stepping into the hypothetical realm. If Rodgers retires and Jordan Love's quarterback one, maybe you don't need to have the same conversation with Love because he hasn't played a game yet, but these are conversations you have with Aaron Rodgers or that Seattle would have with Russell Wilson or Kansas City has with Mahomes, etc.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you again here. Like, I think starting number one, the best way to go about being a leader of men or a boss, somebody who has a high executive position on a team, I mean, you have to hear from the people that work for you and you work with. Obviously, the way that things have gone is Green Bay says they're open to hearing Rodgers, but the problem is, hearing Rodgers' like opinion and input, but they're not approaching him for it. And I think he wants that. Instead, they're like, our door's open if he ever wants to come in. I don't think that's the right way to go about it, obviously, because now Rodgers has felt this way for a long time. He's blatantly said, Kenny Mayne in his first interview, which was around early April before the draft, he said to Kenny Mayne, Kenny Mayne asked him, do you think the Packers would listen to you if you said, oh, this center or this receiver I like? And Rodgers laughed and said no. And I mean, so Rodgers doesn't feel like he would even be heard or he's listened to, and the Packers aren't reaching out to him. So that's why there's no communication line there, and that's the problem. And it seems so simple and it seems so trivial, but at the same time, there's some stubbornness on both sides. Rightfully so. That's what happens in this league. You get people who are high-level executives like Brian Gutekunst. Rodgers obviously is the best quarterback in football, and obviously they are two alpha male type people who have a lot of, they have a lot of responsibility and they have a lot of leadership qualities, but at the same time, they both are set in a lot of their ways and believe in their process that got them to each point that they're at. Whether Brian Gutekunst becoming the GM and he's confident in the things he's done to get there. Same thing with Rodgers and the quarterback. So that as a quarterback, I mean, so that's the problem. And how do you fix it? Well, I think the communication line has to open up. It seems so easy, right? Why isn't it? I feel like if I told this to Rodgers, would that solve it? If I said to Rodgers, we're going to start coming to you, when we have a move that we're going to make and we're going to let you know and we're going to tell you why we're doing it. We're not even, maybe he doesn't even need to be asked about it. But if he is given a heads up on, the rationale behind moves that they're making, and then Brian can say, what do you think of that? Give us your thoughts on that move. And Rodgers could say, he could give his opinion, and then the team will take it into account. And that seems so easy for a guy who's obviously the best. I keep saying he's the best quarterback in football. He's, like you said, he's got experience, second to none in this league.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems so obvious and so easy, yet here we are still. And hopefully they can figure it out. It's got to be an olive branch by the organization to Rodgers. Rodgers can't do anything more than what he's done. They need to show him that they're willing to communicate with him on moves like that. And also, I think the cherry on top would be to show that security and to show a philosophical change by giving him some security, like I mentioned. And I think that's really all it takes. And it seems easy, but it just hasn't happened yet. And I'm confident it will. James Jones said as much as well. So I feel like in the end, hopefully before training camp, things will get settled and we'll be ready to go here and talk about football instead of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about a little bit of football here. Mr. Jordan Love, he had a great game, great day in camp today. I heard that maybe the tight ends coach was like fanning him off because he hit like 4 or 5 throws in a row. But what I didn't know until I looked at your Instagram at Lambeau.leapers. For those interested, I would hope you follow Alex already,
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned that he didn't have a great day at camp yesterday, and
right.
There's I don't want to say inconsistency. It's two days of camp, but I hadn't heard anything about. No one in the media said, "Oh, Love sucks on day one." No, but then as soon as Love starts making these nice completions today, it's Jordan Love is on fire. He's getting fanned off by his coaches.
Right.
What do you make of that? Like that. There's a lot of media coverage when he starts balling out, but there's little to no media coverage when he sucks.
Well, you know what it is, of course. You know what I'm going to say to this, too. I mean, it fits the narrative. It fits Adam Schefter's narrative. First, yesterday, they talked about it a little bit, and he said, oh, the Packers know if Jordan Love is terrible, and Rodgers doesn't come back, after seeing practice today, they know that they have no chance to compete without Rodgers. And of course, he's just saying whatever comes to his mind. I mean, Schefter, I don't want to get too into much, with Schefter, but I remember after the draft, in the 2020 draft, maybe a week after the draft, during that week when the Packers selected Jordan Love, he said he made this claim, it just blew my mind, that Matt LaFleur was surprised by the Jordan Love pick. And it just blows my mind. I mean, that makes no sense. He's the head coach. He's obviously involved in the draft process. It would shock me. I mean, that would be a deep, deep level of communication issue. But the way that it's set up, it's Matt LaFleur, Russ Ball, and Brian Gutekunst all report to Mark Murphy. So they had to have, Matt LaFleur had to have known. But here, Adam Schefter is making this claim, treating it like fact. And I don't know where he's hearing these things or what makes that, come to his mind, but it's just the reality of it. I don't understand it. So that's the kind of style of things that you were hearing when Jordan Love wasn't playing well. But today, of course, now Jordan Love is playing well in one practice. Of course, neither mean much. His struggles mean very little, and his successes mean very little because they're not in pads. They're in shorts. There's no pass rush. I mean, this is like, it's practice. This isn't anything of value. But, I mean, now the media is running with this idea that Jordan Love is going to push maybe they don't need Rodgers. Maybe, it's like, I mean, this is ridiculous. It's you can't look at any media anymore. You got to come here for the facts nowadays. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there's one part of maybe I'm going to play devil's advocate for Schefter for a moment.
Go ahead.
If you want to see someone just rip into Schefter, check out the Dan Patrick interview. Great stuff by Dan. But devil's advocate, let's say LaFleur didn't want to take Love. Let's say it was a split decision, and if you have 5 decision makers, 3 of them want Love, 2 of them don't want Love. There's a chance Matt LaFleur didn't want Love, but Schefter could misconstrue that as he didn't know about Love.
That's a possibility.
Try that. But I mean, if you're Matt LaFleur and you know that you have Aaron Rodgers, you might not want a quarterback. You might want a weapon for the quarterback. You might want an extra defensive player because you know what you're going to get from Aaron Rodgers. And you can you can go back to the draft and say, well, it was an F pick because you're not helping the roster. You're kind of replacing a piece that is the most irreplaceable piece on the roster, that you're not helping anything. You are Jordan Love's going to play 0 snaps in 2020. He played 0 snaps in 2020. And if you had drafted, I don't know who would.
Queen.
Okay. If you draft Patrick Queen, for instance, my guy, if you draft him, you at least get snaps on the field. If you draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't know why you would, but if you do, you're getting snaps on the field. You can see something. I guess you did draft a running back in the second round.
We did get a backup running back who's now a starter, but I mean, we made sure to cover all our backup bases in the draft. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
AJ Dillon is a beast, though.
He is going to be. He's our breakout player this year. He's going to be out of this world. But to go back to Schefter, like you said, that could be a possibility. But also, there were reports that LaFleur was calling his coaches at Utah State and like gushing over, I wish we had the possibility to pick him. He's going to be gone by whatever.
Right. Okay.
And so, I mean, all these, we hear reports all the time. We heard reports that Rodgers wants Gutekunst fired, and James Jones has said Rodgers, all these people are saying now that that's not true. And I never believe that to be true. I mean, that's just not Rodgers. That's not his style. He's not that type of guy.
Absolutely.
And then in the same way that I don't think he's the type of guy to hold out of training camp. But he is being slighted here. So if he were to hold out for a portion of camp, but I think he will eventually play regardless, whether he misses the first week of camp or whatever date he comes, I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the field. And people are turning on Rodgers. People are hating on Jordan Love. And I just, it's hard to, I mean, you can't blame anybody for how they're feeling because, number one, Jordan Love symbolizes the Packers forcing Rodgers out or trying to get rid of him. Rodgers is now the one who doesn't want to come back, reportedly, or, and that's what's being said. And now everybody's, there's no right way for Jordan Love to go about playing, and he's got a lot of pressure on him. But it's, of course, it's good to see him play well. It's not good to see him play bad, but it fits everybody's narrative, whether he plays good or bad. And now, like you mentioned the word inconsistency. That's not good. I mean, there's a reality there that if he goes into practice one day and is overthrowing guys, missing, reads and things like that, with no pass rush, in shorts, like all that, I mean, I don't expect him to have much success in the preseason, and nobody's really expecting him to. But in this day and age when quarterbacks in Green Bay, the local Green Bay people, everybody understands that it takes time to develop a quarterback. But everywhere else you look in the league, apart from maybe Kansas City, who did it the right way with Mahomes, just about everybody else throws guys right into the fire. Jordan Love on almost any other team would have started last year. Who knows how he would have did? Probably not great because he obviously has a lot of work to do, and he's already sat a year behind Aaron Rodgers. When you learn from a guy, even if it's just textbook stuff in the classroom, like when you're sitting behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers for a full year where they're having a lot of success and you're just watching Rodgers work, you'd think he'd improve on some level, but the fact that he still came out and struggled on Tuesday was, that's obviously a little bit of concern. But then you come back to today and he played well, but he's got to put it together. Matt LaFleur didn't put much stock into it either way. This is nothing to him. I mean, these are just, they're valuable reps, but they're really not anything of note until you get to camp, until you get to the preseason, until you actually face another team. He hasn't done any of that yet, and he's not going to do any of that for a couple months. So the good thing is that he's got time. He says he's going to be ready for week one, but of course, everybody's going to say that. Everybody has to say that. NFL players are treated that way, where you're expected to come ready to play as the starter every week, whether you're the third string, you're the starter, you're the backup, whatever. I mean, so he has to say that. But the good thing is that he has time to potentially, if for whatever reason, if somehow, that was necessary, then he's got time. And the other thing is, he doesn't need to, in an ideal scenario, Rodgers is back. He doesn't need to be ready for week one. I mean, he's got time, as long as Rodgers is back, Jordan Love has plenty of time to, prepare. And this will be his first year as the true number two. He's getting all the reps, basically, I would say about 90% of the reps in practice, which is abnormal for what Green Bay usually does, where you've got Rodgers taking 50%, and then the second string, which would have been Tim Boyle last year, is getting about 25. Jordan, maybe even 35, and Jordan Love's getting whatever's left over. Like that was how it was. And now this year it's a little bit different. They're trying to give Love as many reps as possible to kind of make up for what he lost last year, and take advantage of the fact that Rodgers isn't here right now, which isn't a bad thing for anybody apart from really, it's really not a bad thing for anybody. Of course, you just want the fans really is the only one that wants Rodgers in the building. So for now, it's good. Rodgers will be back for training camp, the mandatory mini camp, the 3 days of practice. That's not really something Rodgers is too concerned about. He doesn't need 3 days of practice in shorts to be any better. So
yeah, and I think this is one of the things that I always think about when guys like are late coming to training camp or hold out. These are professional athletes. A lot of them keep in shape regardless, even if they weren't being paid millions and millions of dollars. I guess being the millions of dollars help you stay in shape because you can buy better equipment and whatnot. But if there's any guy that can come in and say, I'm not going to come to camp for, say, 2 weeks, but can show up 15 days into camp in great shape, it's your reigning MVP quarterback that's been doing it for 15 years. You know,
exactly.
Like I have no concerns with Aaron Rodgers. Who do you guys play week 1?
Saints.
Okay. I have no concern. If Aaron Rodgers held out until Saturday the 11th, I have zero. I have less than zero. I would trust Aaron Rodgers to go out and destroy the Saints. You know, and the Saints have a pretty solid secondary, but I have all trust in the world that Aaron Rodgers could hibernate for the next 3 months and then roll out of bed on the 12th and just slaughter New Orleans.
Right. I mean, yeah, it would be so Rodgers to come down a helicopter ladder and onto the field with his helmet and pads on and just sling it around, put a 40 burger on the Saints. I mean,
that's like a Madden. Like if I were creating Madden, like a face of the franchise type ordeal, Madden, take our idea. That's a great idea. Just get your star quarterback, helicopter him in, and just start slinging balls to Devontae Adams and MVS and the other Rodgers, Amari Rodgers.
I'm excited for him. He's apparently playing well. He's one of the guys that are showing out, as is another addition to the receiver room, Devin Funchess. So I'm excited about this receiver group. Everybody talked about how they need people still are saying they need another receiver, but to me, unless you're adding a guy at the Julio Jones, OBJ level, guys that really improve your team. When you look at this receiver group, it's about 6 deep of guys that are legitimate ballers. Obviously, Adams at the top. You've got MVS and Lazard, who are probably going to at least initially battle for that number 2 spot. I think Funchess could certainly get in the mix if he gets the playbook down right away. Then, of course, Rodgers, Amari is the gadget guy, and he'll be doing some stuff in the slot right away. He'll be on the boundary as well. He'll get his touches, but he's not quite there yet. But EQ is still in the mix, and he's done some good things over the years, although he had a couple of miscues throughout the season. But I mean, he's still in there, and that's 6 guys right there that you really look at and you're excited about. So I really think that group is one of the better ones that we've had since we've lost guys like Cobb. So I think now bringing that group back together, since Jordy, Cobb, others. I mean, this is one of the better, deeper groups that we have, and I think this is one that could be enough to get us back to the Super Bowl, especially on offense.
Yeah, then you throw in Aaron Jones, who's always been a good pass-catching back. You have A.J. Dillon, who, per sources, is showing stuff as a receiver, and it's like, he's essentially Derrick Henry, and I am like, wow, this man's super athletic. Then you throw in Tunyon, who probably should have been a Pro Bowler last year.
Definitely.
You throw in one of our favorite players. We talked about him before, Jay Sternberger.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're rocking 10 deep at that point in terms of guys that can catch the football, and you can only have 5 guys that can catch the ball on offense at any given time. You have 5 O-line, quarterback. I just broke that down way too much. But anyways, to me, it's kind of like what Pittsburgh has to deal with, that it's nice to have a bunch of good players, but you need a little bit more juice. Green Bay has the juice. They have the second best receiver in football as far as I'm concerned with Devontae Adams. And if you think he's number 1, I'm totally cool with that. He was spectacular last year, and for good reason. And if you're Green Bay, your last concern is the weapons, because even if, let's say, MVS starts dropping 100% of passes instead of 50%, and Lazard sucks and Funchess sucks. Hey, guess what? You still have the best quarterback in the NFL, and you have Devontae Adams, and you have a pretty good offensive line, and you have Aaron Jones, and you have A.J. Dillon. So even if, heaven forbid, like half the Packers, let's say they contract football-itis and they can't play football, I trust the wide receivers to produce still.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things that Devontae Adams is going to have 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. It's like, what are you going to do? Outside of that, who cares, really?
Yeah.
Like, who cares how good Alan Lazard is when you have a million options?
They have so many options, and there might not be a true number two. Once again, Green Bay is really not big into that, but I think they're going to have a lot of guys who contribute. Maybe the most guys in the league that are going to contribute, in a big way for the offense. And you talked about the tight ends. There's a lot of guys that have made plays for this team and that are going to make plays. Whether it's the tight ends, the running backs, each of those positions is super deep and super talented at the top end when you go down the line. So I think this is really the best team we've had in many years, and it's hard to believe that they've improved. If they keep Rodgers, I feel like they've done enough, especially when you look at the draft. They've brought all those guys back that they really couldn't replace. I'm pretty excited about this group. The only question, of course, is, when you look at the offensive side of the ball, they did lose Corey Linsley, but I think Josh Myers is going to be, if not him, there's other guys. I think Myers he's looked like a pro already. Like he's got that high IQ when you're talking about football at the center line, and he's already done a lot of great work in terms of the communication with the other linemen. He's got that all on him right away. They're treating him like a starter. I'm excited for him as well. And then the Packers finally made a free agent signing that was not a quarterback or a long snapper. They brought in Devondre Campbell at linebacker, which I was excited about. I mean, that's a guy who, he's not a great pass coverage guy. He's not a great run stopper, but he's a tackler. I mean, he's something the Packers defense over the years hasn't had a lot of, especially since they've lost Blake Martinez, which is a guy who has a great tackling regimen. And when you look at PFF, his tackling grades are all above 80 for almost every year he's played. And that's obviously it's very easy to not tackle a guy like, but you look at some of the film that he's had over the years. Some of his greatest film he's had against guys like Derrick Henry, other good running backs. Like you look at some of the stuff that he's done against guys like Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, obviously playing in Atlanta. McCaffrey. He's made some tackles on some very elusive guys, big guys, great body type. He's a veteran, and the middle linebacker room had zero veteran presence apart from Ty Summers, who was, I think this is his third year, either his third or fourth year we're going into now. But it is Kamal Martin and Chris Barnes, and now you add Campbell, who's probably a plug-and-play guy. You could start him. He's a first and second down type guy. You get the speedier guys on the field for third. But I think he's certainly a player that is going to help this team. He could be, he's had some success in Atlanta and Arizona. He has had some success. Started all 16 games for Arizona last year. I mean, he's a starter in this league. Got him out there for a minimum deal. I'm perfectly fine with it. I think it's a great addition to, especially at this point. I think it's a great addition to the room. I didn't even know he was a free agent, so I was surprised to see him still available, and now to be on our team is quite the pickup. At this stage.
for sure. And even we talked about with the wide receivers that they need something to push them over the top. So you're only really like muddling the water there if it's Julio Jones, right?
Yeah.
The linebacker room is a position, at least for the Packers, that you just need more players. You just need more talent there. And I'm not saying Calais Campbell. Devondre Campbell is a superstar by any means. I don't even know if he's an above average linebacker. But getting average snaps at a position like linebacker might be all that you need when you have Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark up front.
Yeah.
The linebacker room is the least important of the three rooms on defense. And we know the Packers have a great pass rush. We know the Packers have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. At a certain point, if you can just get remotely competent play out of your linebackers, as long as they're not getting burned, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a tight end. If you have Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Waller, Kittle, awesome. But as long as you have a guy that you can throw the ball to, as long as you have a Robert Tonyan, unless you're Evan Ingram can't catch footballs. If you have a competent linebacker, it's double thumbs up. You don't need Bobby Wagner. You don't need my guy, Eric Kendricks. You don't need Levante David, Fred Warner. You don't need a superstar. You just need someone remotely competent because you have to have 11 players on defense. And I think Campbell is certainly a competent player, and he's not going to make you worse.
Yeah, you summed it up there. I think to get another body, especially a veteran to potentially, maybe he'll start, wearing the green dot. I mean, to take some of the pressure off these young guys. Chris Barnes was an undrafted kid. He was thrust into it right away. He started week 1 undrafted. I mean, that's the way Green Bay operates. They've got undrafted guys all over the field. Kamal Martin really wasn't right away because he was injured, but he got plugged in and played well. And he's, so these guys are both young and developing. But Campbell, he's had great experience. He's started many games in this league. He was with Matt LaFleur in Atlanta when they drafted him. There's connections there. I mean, he's, of course, the Joe Barry defense. He's got a middle linebacker coach as the defensive coordinator, and I think he's got some level of familiarity with some of the stuff that they've done there, especially with LaFleur being there and some of the defensive concepts that, probably LaFleur wants to implement in unison with Barry will be there. So he's got a philosophical connection. I do think that there will be some level of improvement at that spot this year. Having a guy, especially off the street, like I said, it's pretty impressive pickup at this stage. And I think that's kind of one of the things that Brian Gutekunst does so well, especially in a year like last year where he was able to add some legitimate talent like to the room, whether it was whatever like the cornerback room, he added Tramon Williams when we needed a tackle. He got Jared Valdir. Like he would make these moves. Damon Snacks Harrison, who we all were excited when we picked him up. Like he would make these moves to try to help us improve, and he continues to do that. And it's not these big splash moves, but he gets the value. He gets the value, and I think Brian, in that respect, has done a fantastic job in terms of surrounding this team with the players to win. And when you look at this roster top to bottom, maybe more than ever in recent years, I mean, it's a true Super Bowl roster. I mean, this is no slouch. Rodgers is not, I can tell you Rodgers is not upset with who they have on the team. He's excited about this group, but he knows how good this team is. But I'm not sure he really thinks anything needs to be added. I know for a fact that this is a group that I know the front office is excited about it. Of course, they've got just a ton of talent across the board, especially on defense. Now that this whole group basically has stayed together on defense, they haven't lost anybody. They even brought back Kevin King. I mean, this group they're really bringing the group back together, and now a new system, but the same guys, same elite players. So I think everybody's excited about the direction of the team. Instead of, being in that NFC Championship game and losing, I feel like they all think that they improved and feel like that they can get back to the Super Bowl and win it this time around.
Absolutely. And like one thing that people don't talk about a lot is the accumulation of solid
information
players.
From Adam Schefter.
Oh boy. Yeah. The accumulation of like solid players and getting actual like NFL caliber players.
Right.
Well, every team has a bunch of NFL caliber players. No, there's a difference. There are some guys out there on Sundays that, with all due respect, are not a top, I can't do math in my head right now, but are not a top, say, 64 safety in the world. But they're playing. Sometimes it's injuries. Sometimes it's the team makes a horrendous draft mistake and they're playing, say, Terrell Edmunds. Now, granted, Terrell Edmunds has vastly improved in 2020, but in 2019 Terrell Edmunds was a liability for Pittsburgh. But regardless, when you can we talk about the stars a lot, we talk about trash players a lot, talk about the middle ground, talk about Green Bay has added a lot of pieces that they're not superstars. We talked Campbell's not a superstar, Devin Funchess isn't a superstar, but having pieces like that can give you, say, 700 good snaps in a season, that's better than taking a guy off the street and he gives you 700 bad snaps. And outside of Tampa, every team at Tampa, you could argue they have a superstar at every position almost.
Right.
Every other team, you're worried about getting depth. Yeah, you're going to have, every team has a superstar, at least in some regard, outside of, I don't know, maybe the Jets. So sorry, Jets fans. But every team has some stars. Every team has like upper echelon talent. Every team has a guy that you would go buy their jersey, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Pro Bowl guy, could be an all-pro guy. Every team has one of those guys. Every team has some bad players. Your goal, to me, is to minimize your bad players and maximize the number of like talented guys that can do something, guys that can, like New England does this every year to great success, that it doesn't matter that Patrick Chung has some deficiencies on defense. Bill Belichick puts him in a position to succeed. It doesn't matter that, like, pick a guy that's not, like, pick Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams is terrible in coverage, but guess what? Seattle doesn't ask him to cover. They ask him to rush the passer, and he's pretty doggone good at rushing the passer. You know, you're not going to ask DK Metcalf to run elaborate routes. You're going to ask him to run down the field and burn everybody. He had 1,300 yards for a reason. Yeah. You're not going to ask Devontae Adams to do what DeAndre Hopkins does, because he's not going to do that as well as DeAndre Hopkins, but he's going to do Devontae Adams stuff really well, and he's going to be the best receiver in the league at running routes and getting separation. And, you know, when you put players in a position to succeed and you put good players on the field, even if they're not elite players, when you put good players on the field, good things happen. If you put bad players on the field, bad things happen. And in a league that has a finite number of superstars, a finite number of stars, unless you're Madden, then you think everyone's a star, you need to maximize the number of good players. And I think that's something that Green Bay's done through the draft. You know, they're not drafting superstars with every pick, but I still have the draft ticker pulled up here, and I would be shocked if most of these guys, if many of these guys like just totally suck. Right. I don't love Eric Stokes. He should be a fine corner. I don't love Josh Myers. He should be a fine offensive lineman. I actually do love Amari Rodgers. Newman, Slayton, Jean-Charles, Van Lanen, McDuffie, and I think Hill can be really good. Those guys should at least be competent NFL players. And when you're in a position like Green Bay is, on the precipice of the Super Bowl, it might be getting 50 extra snaps a game at linebacker. Like Devondre Campbell could be the difference between like a solid defense and a really good defense. Campbell's not moving the needle. It's just you're as strong as your weakest link, especially in the NFL with these play callers that, an undrafted rookie linebacker? Okay, we're going to run wheel routes against him all game, you know? And if Kyle Shanahan can run those wheel routes against Isaiah Simmons, a top 10 pick, and just obliterate him, you know, what can you do against a guy that has zero tools? Yeah. And so I think Green Bay has done a great job of building up talent in recent years, even if it's not elite talent outside of Rodgers and Adams, and then the secondary and the pass rush are all great. Just good players. Robert Tonyan, that's why you win 13 games. You know, Devondre Campbell, that's why you go to the NFC title game back-to-back years. Because Rodgers has been there the entire time, and there's ebbs and flows to some degree, you know, but it's important to have a lot of good players, and Green Bay does that really well.
Yeah, I definitely think I think the one thing they do is try to at least, you know, minimize, like you kind of talked about, they minimize the minuses on the field. I think they've got a lot of positives too, and that's the thing. And by getting some of these guys like Campbell, I think he's not a plus. You know, I wouldn't say he's a plus, but he could certainly be one of those guys that cancels out a potential minus at the position. Right. And the lack of minuses is obviously key, because, like you said, it really takes all 11. Like, the NFL is the one game where if one person isn't doing their job correct, the whole play blows up. It could cost you the whole game. Like, it's truly all 11. Every cliche, it's all true, because if one person makes a mistake, it could cost the whole team games, you know, the whole season, that kind of thing. So that's really important, and I think Brian has done a great job of that. And as long as Aaron comes back, this team is ready and built for everything.
Yeah, and I'll just use a quick example before we wrap up. Take the Kevin King play in the NFC title game. If Kevin King plays, say, 2% better coverage there, say something Eric Stokes can do. If he plays a little bit better coverage, that play doesn't happen. Packers might win that game. You know, it's a game of inches, and all of the cliches, like you said, apply. A game of inches, whatever you want to say, that if one play matters, you want an average player performing that play rather than a bad player, right? You want an average corner rather than Kevin King. You want, with all due respect to Kevin King and all the linebackers, you want Devondre Campbell doing that job more than Chris Barnes. Yeah, you know, depending on what job it is, or Kamal Martin. Yeah, you know, and it's a situational game, and this is what the consistent teams do. This is what New England does. This is what Pittsburgh does. This is what Seattle does. that like pieces come in, pieces come out, but at the end of the day, they have 11 guys that can actually play football. They don't have one guy that they may not have like a superstar. You know, you look at the Patriots defense, and until they got Gilmore, there was a couple years there that how are the Patriots that good defensively? They have like no guys that you think of as say top 100 players, but then Gilmore, of course. But it's like, what's going on? Or Pittsburgh, well, I guess now they have Watt and Minka, but again, it's a lot of they have 11 guys that are good at football on the field.
Yeah, that's
Seattle
true.
generally has 11 guys that are good at football. You know, maybe not in recent years, but for a long time they were the model of consistency, and the Packers have been this model of consistency, especially on offense, especially offensive line. That
Yes.
who's the last like legitimately bad Green Bay offensive lineman?
Jason Spriggs. You remember Jason?
Oh my, vaguely.
Yeah, he was. We traded up in the second round for him, and I think he's currently on the Bears. I think so. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay, yeah. So like
Not
other
bad.
teams, you look at I don't know Cincinnati. I don't want to throw my division rivals under the bus, but Cincinnati, Miami, they in recent years, Houston. You're telling me that they were giving. Oh my goodness, he had a weird name with like a Julian Davenport. Why is Julian Davenport getting NFL snaps?
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't remember the last time Green Bay had a guy that's like why is that guy on the football field?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
injuries aside, I get it, but like even like Billy Turner's like fine, Rick Wagner was fine, you know. Like the worst you're gonna get from a Packers lineman or a Steelers lineman is fine, you know. Broncos lineman, it's okay, passable NFL player.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the Packers do a great job with the offensive line. And you kind of see evidence of that based on how they drafted, of course, and the high level of competition that's going to be going on there, especially as camp rolls around. I couldn't even tell, I could give you a guess, but I couldn't confidently tell you that, this line is going to be the starting five. Like, and that's the great thing about it, especially with the injuries, right? Like we've got a great group of guys coming in, especially young ones that are going to be pushed to potentially go for a starting job.
So I would imagine it's Bakhtiari, Jenkins for sure.
Yep.
Myers at center.
Bakhtiari will be ready. Bakhtiari is dealing with the rehab. He feels like he could be ready though. So
okay. So Myers at center.
Potentially. That's
and then John Runyon at right guard.
See, that's what I think. If I had to guess today, Bakhtiari's healthy. It'll be Bakhtiari, Jenkins on the left, and then center, I'm assuming, will be Myers. But if not Myers, maybe it's Lucas Patrick who moves to center. But if it's Myers at center, then you're probably looking at Lucas Patrick. But if Patrick gets cut, it's Runyon. But if Patrick doesn't get cut, it'll be Patrick, and then it'll be Bill Turner on the right. But there's possibilities of guys like Royce Newman, the 4th round pick. He could go to tackle if he plays better than. This is a puzzle. If Newman plays better than Runyon, and Turner and Patrick is not on the field, like if they cut Patrick because they like the depth, the young depth, then they'll put maybe Newman will go to tackle or guard, and Turner could go to tackle or guard, and they'll have those two guys. Maybe Runyon is in there. I mean, like there's a lot of guys you could throw in there. Like I didn't even mention some of the other guys that are competing too. Like there's a lot of guys. Ben Braden was shouted out as a potential guy who's competing for a guard spot on the line. Like there's just a lot of talent in the room. We still have Simon Stepaniak, who was a bit of I think he was a 6th round pick, but he was injured and was it could have been an earlier pick. People were talking about a 2nd round for him potentially. Like there's so many guys. I could list them all off, but it's all the same story.
Yeah. So we're dragging on a little bit. So any last words before we wrap it up?
Should I tell you more about the O-line or?
we should have like a Patreon only, or like that'd be cool. Like just deep dives on like random offensive linemen.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, look, no, the main thing is, once again, with the Aaron Rodgers thing, let's just, let's not make any, rash decisions as fans, or let's not, all these things. Like, let's not hate on Jordan Love for having success, and let's not pressure him to come in and play well right away, and let's not overreact. And I think same thing with Rodgers, right? You look at the Rodgers situation, not every little report that we hear is going to be something important. Like, I think everybody overreacts to the latest from everything, and I think we just have to let it. The only people I'm really concerned about hearing from at this point are either people that we know talks to Aaron on a consistent basis, or Aaron himself, and then probably Brian Gutekunst and our Mark Murphy, because Matt LaFleur really says nothing when he talks about Rodgers. He says nothing of note, like nothing that really makes any news or headlines. But when we hear from Brian, whenever the next time we hear from him is, or if we hear from Mark Murphy again or Rodgers, that'll be when we'll hear something maybe of value. But other than that, it's really everything. You just have to kind of wait and see, be patient, and just be confident in the process. They're not going to let him get out the door. I just don't see it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to wrap us up for today. Make sure you follow Alex on Instagram at Lambeau.leapers. Follow U Stadium on Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe to the channel. Smash that like button. We're getting pretty close to that watch hour, so we can start monetizing. So that means both of our pockets get lined a little bit. Download the app. Alex posts some great stuff. And, of course, he always posts great stuff on his Instagram. With that said, I got to go to a Jets show. But we'll be back next Wednesday, June 16th, for some more, off-season talk. Probably talk about, oh, look, Jordan Love overthrew a guy in practice. He's a bust.
All right.
With that said, peace out, folks.